The Pixel 8a is an interesting camera prospect, but it is an even more interesting product. The affordable line of Google Pixel phones always punch way above their weight when it comes to the ultra-wide performance and main rear-facing performance of that main camera lens. So let's talk about the camera performance. We will first start with video. So I'm here to report you some good news, and it is that the Google Pixel 8a is a fantastic video phone. So all through the zoom ranges from ultra-wide through to the 1x and actually even the 2x digital zoom. Don't get me wrong, the 2x isn't going to win any awards, but it is a digital crop. The 1x and the 0.5 are really fantastic. The colors kind of have their typical Google Pixel vibrancy that you tend to expect from this line of smartphones. So a quick note on all the footage that you're watching here. So first off, it has been slowed down from 30 frames a second down to a 25 frames a second timeline. So it is playing at 84% speed, just to give you guys the most accurate view possible. Unless I'm wrong, you can't film in 25 frames a second with the Google Pixel, so that's why I've done that. These were all taken on a recent trip that I went to near Annecy in France, or as you can see, just an absolutely stunning place and area, so it's the perfect place to put the Pixel 8a through its paces. I think, to be honest, when you look at kind of just picture for picture, the Pixel is probably one of the most pleasing looks available on the market right now, and the video is up there with the S24 Ultra, the iPhone. I think anyone's going to look at this and just think it's fantastic smartphone video. The colors particularly are just absolutely gorgeous. I do love the kind of like house style that the Pixel uses for its videos. Everything looks saturated, well exposed, and nice and even. So fantastic to see the video performance has seemingly been improved over the last few years generation, though Android cameras just still seem to not be able to quite achieve the level of stabilization that the iPhone can achieve, the kind of naturalness. For some reason, the iPhone just continually looks more natural in its movement and its stabilization, whereas Android phones, a lot of Android phones as well, even going up to phones like the Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra, always just look a bit artificial and jittery. I want to clarify this actually quickly, because the stabilization is certainly not bad on the Pixel and on a lot of Android phones now. This almost is almost like an Android-wide issue, to be honest. It's not that the stabilization is bad, it's just that it looks a little bit fake. I would say it actually looks like I'm using a handheld gimbal here. Whereas on the iPhone, you kind of get a much more organic, natural feel while still retaining, obviously, no shake in the image. Low light videos is where we start to see things break down a bit. You, of course, are making a sacrifice when you buy something like the Google Pixel 8a. There has to be a sacrifice somewhere. This is a fantastic piece of hardware, but it is obviously a slightly more budget smartphone. So whilst the camera software is absolutely incredible on this smartphone, the hardware is where that takes a cut, and low light videos is one of those areas where the software can only dramatically improve it to a certain point. It's actually worth noting as well that the ultra wide is particularly bad here. Like, look at this, there's so much noise in that image, whereas when you're just working with the normal 1x lens, it's not quite as notable. They're certainly not bad and they're certainly usable, but this is one area where a more expensive Pixel phone will do significantly better. So now let's move on to photos. I've done this a little bit differently to normal. I'm kind of mixing in the 1x lens and the ultra wide lens at the same time. A kind of common denominator for these photos is that the ultra wide lens has a bit more of a flaring issue than the main 1x. You can often see the sun reflecting when you're shooting in brighter conditions, but I do think overall the images that the Pixel produces are just absolutely gorgeous, especially when it just comes to the colors. Everything looks super vibrant, really poppy. There's a good amount of detail in all the frames, and the way that the Pixel kind of exposes everything to be relatively neutral. It wants everything exposed in the scene in a relatively even way. Even though there's an element of personal preference here, I'm sure that that's not going to appeal to absolutely everyone. You certainly can't argue that this camera isn't one of the best when it comes to the ultra wide and that main rear facing sensor. I think the vibrancy of photos is extremely interesting here, because this is again the Pixel look, but I do think when you compare these things side by side to like maybe an iPhone shot and a Pixel 8a shot, you do get a significant difference when it comes to vibrancy. This trip that I just did to France, it was quite interesting to share the photos, show people the kind of differences in colors, and everyone is always kind of really receptive to that. People often think that the photos look dramatically better on the Pixel, especially when you've got a lot of blue skies in the shot. The Google Google Pixel really ramps up the saturation, gets them to really, really pop. The iPhone is a little bit more natural. So it's quite interesting to see that on the surface, people would go, oh, that's like a really great photo. Whereas you could probably achieve a similar look on the iPhone just by bumping that saturation up. The HDRness of the Pixel photos is something I talk a lot about on this channel. You guys have heard me talk about it time and time again, and it's obvious that this is now just a Pixel trait. Google are almost baking it into every single line of Pixel phones. It's how the software handles certain lighting situations. I do really wish they gave an option to either tone this down, and by that I mean toning it down by default on the camera app, not kind of having to adjust this on a shot-by-shot basis. You can adjust shadows inside the camera app, but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about here, because I obviously don't want to have to do that every single time on one of these shots. It would be good if you got almost like an HDR slider or something like that you could just adjust the look and feel of this look to your liking. The good news is you get the new improved camera app on the Pixel 8a, so you get a few manual controls inside the camera app. I believe the more advanced camera manual controls are exclusively reserved for the Pixel 8 Pro. I believe that this is the same camera app that you get access to in the Pixel 8. I think the improvements to the app are fantastic. You still get access to the long exposure mode, which is one of my favorite modes to shoot on the Google Pixel 8. And the good news is Google is allowing you access to some of those AI features, which is really great to see that it's not kind of shoehorning those and reserving those only for the expensive phones in the Google lineup. So you get access to like best take, where it takes a whole bunch of photos and will choose the best from the lineup for each individual face. We've previously spoken about the HDR tendencies of the Google Pixel phone, but night mode is where it particularly often comes into fruition. You can see photos like this just end up looking very fake. Again, this is something kind of characteristic of Google Pixel phones in general. You're going to still be receiving this on the Pixel 8, just like you would with any other Pixel device. And so we come to a sort of verdict and pricing discussion. I think this is extremely important for this phone. I mentioned right at the start of the video, this sits somewhere very, very interesting when it comes to specifically the camera on the smartphone. But I know that a lot of people buy a smartphone due to its camera, or it's a massive purchasing decision when they're considering a smartphone. The Pixel 8a, the 7a, the 6a's cameras perform way above their kind of pay grade. You wouldn't expect a camera this good necessarily on an entry-level smartphone. I think the Pixel 8a is going to be absolutely no different here. It is a seemingly small improvement over the 7a, but nothing dramatic. For the most part, you're paying for the latest generation smartphone. Everything will be slightly better, but the camera system, to be honest, if you put them side by side, I doubt there's much in it. So this is when we come to the price. In the States, it is $499. Right here in the UK, this cost me £499. Right now, there is a sale going on the Pixel 8 that you can pick up that smartphone for £549. And because that phone has been around for a little bit longer now, those sales are becoming more and more frequent. So then we're having to weigh up whether it's worth spending $50, £50 to get a much more capable smartphone in the Pixel 8. Certainly when it comes to the cameras, things won't be dramatically different, but everything is that little bit better on the standard Google Pixel. I think if you're comparing those two prices, the Google Pixel 8 is an absolute no-brainer. However, when we come to talking specifically about the cameras, there is not a $200 price difference between the Pixel 8 and the Pixel 8a. If a smartphone camera is of utmost importance and absolutely essential to you, and these two smartphones are going to cost you that $200 price difference, I would thoroughly recommend you check out the 8A. It is a fantastic camera system for its price. The vibrancy of photos that I've been talking about recently gets everyone kind of quite excited by the photos. Everyone absolutely loves them when they view them on the Pixel screen. You could go far wrong with the Google Pixel 8a, although I'm not so sure it slots directly into that budget category.